Well, hi again, everyone. It's Jim Tarbox again from the virtual Eoin McKiernan reading room at Celtic Junction. In fact, we're in my dining room where we never dine unless it's a special occasion. Back with another Irish fairy tale. This time we're reading from a book called Hibernian Nights by Seamas MacManus. And he was a famous storyteller in Ireland. Today we're going to start a story called The Three Golden Eggs. Once upon a time, long and very long ago, there were a king and a queen of Connacht who had one daughter, Maeve, and a beautiful girl she was, the loveliest in all Ireland, and as good as she was lovely. Now the queen died, and the king married again a woman who had one daughter called Sorcia. An ugly girl Sorcia was, and as unlikable as she was ugly. The new queen right heartily disliked Maeve because she was so much more beautiful and so much more beloved than her own daughter. At the time this happened, the king of Greece had died, and the young prince, his son, who was to succeed him, went traveling over Europe, searching for a fitting and beautiful girl to be his wife and queen of Greece. He had now reached Ireland and was riding around it on his search. When the queen, Maeve's stepmother, heard that he was nearing Connacht, she called in the dressmakers and the beautifiers and had her daughter Sorcia trimmed and trigged and dressed and beautified in the grandest fashion, feeling sure that the prince would choose her to be his queen. To get Maeve out of her daughter's way and place her beyond all chance of choice, she put her in a ragged dress, tied an old handkerchief on her head, and sent her out to herd the geese. When the prince was riding up to the king's castle, he, through a hedge, caught a glimpse of Maeve herding geese in a field and was instantly smitten with love for her. And when he came into the castle and met the queen, he told her how he had just glimpsed the loveliest goose girl ever he had seen in all his life and would like to see more of her. "Not at all," said the queen, says she. "That girl is far from beautiful, and besides is a beggar woman's daughter who would disgrace you. But," says she, "I have here my own daughter, the most beautiful of all Ireland's girls. You will fall in love with her the instant you see her, and she will make a proud queen of Greece." But when Sorcia was brought in and the prince saw her, he was disgusted. "I will go out," says he, "and seek that goose girl." He found Maeve, spoke with her, and fell more deeply in love with her. He said to his attendants, "I don't care if she is a goose girl and a beggar woman's daughter. I'll make her the queen of Greece." But as he was proposed to her, 20 soldiers sent out by the queen seized Maeve and whisked her away and off to the castle before he knew what he was about. Then the prince took consultation with the commander and attendants who rode with him, and it was agreed that they would steal into the castle that night and carry off Maeve. From a herd boy, he learned that she was the real princess, and he hired his herd boy, who knew where Maeve slept, to deliver them to her chamber in the night. But the herd boy gossiped to the servants at the castle, and they alarmed their mistress, the queen, of the prince's plot. And lo and behold, didn't that night the poor old ugly daughter, Sorcia, to sleep in Maeve's bedroom, and put Maeve to sleep in Sorcia's bed. So when the prince and his company, directed by the herd boy, stole into the castle at midnight, it was sleeping Sorcia that they wrapped up in her bedclothes and carried off with them. And the prince had Sorcia before him on his horse as he galloped away. All night they galloped, till in the morning, when they felt they were safe from pursuit, they halted at another castle, and this was the queen's own sister. They asked for and got hospitality here, and when they unwrapped the girl, Behold you, the prince, to his disgust, discovered that it was the ugly Sorcia he had instead of the beautiful Maeve. He told her aunt to send her home again, and said he would return and never come back without the maiden who had won his heart. At this, Sorcia's aunt flew into a rage. Bad as was her sister, the queen, this was a worse woman still, and a witch besides. And as the young prince rode out of the castle gates, she cast on him her spells and changed him into a hawk. But if she changed his form, she couldn't change his heart. The hawk so loved the beautiful Maeve that it flew to the king of Ireland's castle and lit in the trees beside it. And when Maeve came to walk in the garden, the hawk flew down and lit on her shoulder, and gentle Maeve stroked and petted it. It kept with her wherever she went, and when Maeve returned to the castle, it flew up in the trees and stayed there to watch for her coming again. And every time that Maeve came abroad, the hawk flew down upon her shoulder. And when at last it discovered Maeve's chamber window, it flew in at night and nestled in her bosom as she slept. Word spread about the wonderful bird that had come to be a comrade to Maeve, and the queen heard of it, and soon also learnt that the bird was the Prince of Greece himself. She sent word of the hawk's wooing to her evil sister, who then worked her spells that turned the hawk into a hound. But now, whenever Maeve went out, there was a lovely hound awaiting her. It put its feet on her shoulders, kissed her, and licked her face, and the gentle Maeve stroked and petted it, and with Maeve it journeyed wherever she went. Always it was with her, hither and thither, and she fondling it. At length it followed into the castle, and lay and slept at night across the threshold of her chamber. The castle servants began talking about the hound, and in short time it reached the ears of the queen, who knew that it was the Prince of Greece. She sent word to her sister, who then turned the hound into a green linnet. And the sister advised the queen to imprison Maeve in the topmost room of the highest tower of the castle, with only bread and water for food and drink, till she would pine away and die. Then Maeve was imprisoned in the topmost room of the castle's highest tower, from where the queen every day expected to hear that she was pining to her death. The linnet homed in the trees around the castle and sang there, and waited to see Maeve come out for walking. But Maeve, alas, never came. The linnet kept flying and flying from tree to tree, watching and waiting, and singing in hope to see or to attract Maeve, but never once could it catch a glimpse of her. Until, at last one day, sitting and singing on a tree underneath the tower, it glanced up and caught a glimpse of Maeve's small white hand fluttering a handkerchief to it from between the bars of the high window. There was only one very tall poplar tree growing up by the tower, whose top reached close to Maeve's window. Up to the topmost branch of the poplar tree the green linnet flew, rejoicing and sang all day to Maeve, and flew in of her window at night and slept nestling in her bosom. And every day and every night after this, the same it did. And the linnet and Maeve were as happy as the day was long and the night was peaceful. Every day the queen was inquiring of the servant whose duty it was to bring her bread and water to Maeve, if she was losing her beauty and pining to her death. But to her surprise and anger, she was hearing the servant every new day report that Maeve was getting rosier, brighter, and lovelier than she had ever been before, and the eyes of her sparkling with joy. Then the queen had a watch set, and discovered that the linnet was sitting and singing to Maeve from the poplar tree through the day and nestling in her bosom at night. Terribly enraged at this, she sent word of it at once to her witch sister. and her sister cast new spells, and turned the poplar tree into a great hissing, biting serpent, and every branch into a little serpent, hissing and darting and biting. So when the linnet would perch on the tree to sing to Maeve, the tree and all its branches hissed and dabbed and darted and bit the poor bird, till blood flowed from 20 wounds. Maeve tried to persuade the linnet to go away and save itself, but so great was its love for Maeve that it wouldn't do so. When, at length, it looked as if the poor bird must bleed to death, Maeve remembered the yellow river of all healing that flowed in the mountains 100 miles from the castle, told the linnet of it, and sent it away to get healed. The linnet flew off to the yellow river of all healing, and when it was bathing its poor mangled body in the waters, the queen's evil sister came to it and offered, if it would give up Maeve and marry Sorcia, to turn it back into its own handsome and happy prince shape again. And on the marriage day, she would bestow on him a gold mine in the mountains. But the linnet would not listen, and said it would sooner suffer 100 years and sing to its true love, Maeve, than marry Sorcia and get with her the full of a world of gold. After bathing in the river of all healing, the linnet was completely recovered and flew back to the castle and to the hissing, biting poplar tree, where it sat and sang even sweeter than before to Maeve in her tower room. But the tree hissed and darted and dabbed and bit the poor bird till soon it was covered with wounds, was worse than before and ready to drop. Then Meg begged of it to go again to the yellow river of all healing. Again it flew there, and when it was bathing in the river of all healing, the evil woman came and tried to bribe and temper it, and offered to give it not only its own shape as Prince of Greece again, but likewise a whole mountain of gold on the day it would marry Sorcia. But the linnet scorned her offer, and would not listen or heed. And when it had bathed and was recovered, it flew back once more to the castle and to the poplar tree, where the topmost branch, and began singing enchantingly to Maeve in her tower room. The poplar tree and its branches hissed and dabbed and darted and bit and tore at the poor linnet till it was near to death. On Maeve's command, it started off once more for the yellow river of all healing, but so weak and so ill it was from loss of blood, and so sorely suffering from its myriad wounds, that it dropped and fell 100 times on the way, and barely reached the river. For the last mile, its wings dragging, trailing itself along the ground. Barely the last bit of life was left in its body, and the last drop of blood in its heart, when it reached the river. When the evil woman tempted it this day, it was weary and worn and heartsick and sore, yet refused her offer again, saying that as Maeve was its heart's love, her it could never forget, and if it wedded another, it would never know a happy hour because of its thoughts and regrets for lovely sweet Maeve. The evil woman said she would relieve it of its heart pain and had power to give it forgetfulness, so that the thought of Maeve would never again trouble its mind. So weary and worn and heartsore was the poor linnet, and so sure that it never could survive another hour in the cruel poplar tree, that at length it gave in to be turned into its own shape again as Prince of Greece and take Sorcia to that country. But on condition that he should not marry Sorcia for a trial 7 years and a day, to find if for sure thought of Maeve would not come again and make life a dread burden unto him. The evil woman agreed to the condition, and turned him into his own shape, the handsome young prince of Greece, and she took Sorcia with him to his own country. Well, that's the end of part 1 of the 3 golden eggs. We'll be back next time with the conclusion of our story by Seamas MacManus and from Hibernian Nights. See you then.